Welcome to Virtual Wayback. As America approaches the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, we wanted to do something simple but important. Pause long enough to hear the words themselves. The Declaration is one of the most famous documents in American history, but few people know all the words. We know the phrases, we know the date, we know the signatures, but many of us rarely sit with the full text, the argument it makes, the grievances it lists, the risks it carried, and the world it attempted to bring into being. This podcast is an invitation to do that. Whether you are celebrating the 4th of July, visiting historic sites, having a cookout with friends and family, or simply thinking about what the 250th anniversary means, we hope you will take a few minutes to read or listen to the Declaration of Independence in full. Not as a slogan, not as a monument, but as a living historical document, debated by real people, written in a moment of danger, and adopted by a Congress that understood the consequences could be severe. As some put it, they were signing their own death warrant. And, as you celebrate the 250th over the weekend, we hope it helps to remember the timeline of events. July 4th was not the first day Congress voted for independence. That decision on independence came 2 days earlier, on July 2nd, 1776, when Congress approved the resolution declaring that the colonies were, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. In fact, John Adams was famously quoted as saying, "The second day of July, 1776, will be the most memorable epocha in the history of America." Then, on July 4th, Congress approved the final language of the Declaration, the document that explained that decision to the world. The Declaration did not emerge from one man alone. Thomas Jefferson gave it its principal language, but he served on a committee with John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston. Congress then debated and revised the draft before adopting it as the voice of the American cause. For this special reading, we have asked the members of the Committee of Five to give voice to portions of the Declaration they helped bring forward. But before they begin, it is fitting to hear from the man who presided over Congress when the Declaration was adopted, John Hancock. As President of the Continental Congress, Hancock stood at the center of the moment when resistance became independence, and when a political argument became a public commitment. President Hancock, I believe our users are eager to hear your words of introduction.
I am John Hancock, President of the Continental Congress. In July of 1776, Congress had before it, as I wrote to General Washington, one of the most interesting and important subjects that could possibly come before them. For more than a year, these colonies had resisted British authority, while many still hoped that reconciliation might somehow be achieved. But by the summer of 1776, war had already come. British forces were gathering, and the question could no longer be avoided. On July 2nd, after long debate and grave uncertainty, Congress resolved that these united colonies were, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. That was the decision. But a vote alone was not enough. The world had to be told why allegiance to the British Crown had been broken. The people of these colonies had to understand the cause for which they were now asked to risk their lives, their property, and their future. Foreign nations had to see that this was not a disorderly rebellion, but a declaration made upon principle. For that purpose, Congress had appointed a committee: Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston. Mr. Jefferson gave the Declaration its principal language, but the work belonged to more than one man. It was drafted by committee, debated by Congress, amended in its final form, and adopted as the voice of these new American states. On July 4th, Congress approved the Declaration. It explained the decision already made on July 2nd. It set forth the rights of a people, the failures of a king, and the necessity of independence. 2 days later, on July 6th, I sent the Declaration to General Washington and requested that he have it proclaimed at the head of the army. The soldiers needed to know not only that they were resisting British power, but that they were now defending free and independent states. I also wrote that the declaration must be considered as the ground and foundation of a future government. Those words matter still. This was not simply an announcement of separation, it was the beginning of a new political responsibility. What follows are the words Congress sent into the world.
In Congress, July 4th, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form, as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government, and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly, for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures.
He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them, by a mock trial, from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever.
He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is, at this time, transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas, to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us, and has endeavoured to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity,
and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
That was the Declaration of Independence, adopted by Congress on July 4th, 1776, 2 days after the vote for independence itself. At Virtual Wayback, we believe the 250th anniversary is not only a time for celebration, but also a time to listen carefully. The Declaration was not written as a decoration or a slogan. It was an argument, a warning, a statement of principle, and a public commitment made in a moment of real danger. Its words have inspired generations, but they have also challenged generations to ask whether the nation has lived up to the principles it declared. That is part of why the document still matters. It belongs not only to the past, but to every generation asked to understand, defend, question, and renew the meaning of independence. In an experience later next week, we will follow the Declaration from Congress to the Continental Army, where George Washington had it read aloud to the troops in New York on July 9, 1776. There, the words became more than a declaration on paper. They became the cause for which an army was now asked to fight. Thank you for listening to this virtual Wayback podcast. Happy 4th of July, and to America's 250th birthday.
Go talk with them and other signers at virtualwayback.com.